6 to 5 people. It's not that. But now I'm here and very honored
we can talk.
to be among this panel. The panel here is proposed by a selection of distinguished German and Polish scholars. Well, I will introduce them when they start to speak, and we will keep in the row of the program. Well, what can one say about memory, history, and politics in the German-Polish relations? In my view, having taught in Frankfurt Oder right at the border, I had the impression that in the last years that this was a topic which really dominated the political relations or international relations way too much. Now, I'm a historian, and of course, historians also, how can one say, live a little bit if people live from it, if people discuss about history. And of course, to a certain degree, it might be enchanting if you see all these discussions about history. But then on the other hand, when it really comes back to the title, Reconciliation, a never-ending story, I sometimes was wondering when one eventually will stop discussing the so-called hot topics of history, such as expulsion or such as the occupation of Poland during World War II, and when one would start to discuss things which we have discussed already today in the morning, for example, the communist past and how one deals with that. So I think these so-called conflicting issues or conflicting memories, they have dominated the discourses about history way too much for my taste. Now, in all those debates in recent years, I was not sure how much influence historians, by and large, professional academics have on this debate at all. Because one could see that again and again, one has meetings between Polish and German historians. I remind, for example, 2 years ago, there was a session by the joint Polish-German School Book Commission, took part in that as well. And well, we broadly and peacefully discussed the whole issue, the 1940s and everything which happened in them, past grievances, the issue of memory. And basically among the historians, of course, we had discussions, but I wouldn't think that we had a lot of disputes. But then, 2 months later, or half a year later, or 1 year later, again, you would have those headlines in the newspaper saying that there are all these quarrels about history. And I think I have the impression that there's two sides to it. Well, one of it is political games, more or less. And the other side of that is also, I think, a certain problem of the ways how media function. Now, on the panel, we do not only have distinguished academics, but we also have distinguished writers and journalists and publicists, and so I'm curious what they will have to say. Now that for the little introduction, and now I will introduce the first speaker, Dr. Ulrike Ackermann. She's a social scientist from training. She publishes in the most renowned German press and media. I've read texts by herself as well. I think she has a very interesting CV or career, one can say, because there is on the one hand, so to say, a German-French component in that. And obviously, one could think about the French-German reconciliation as an example of how to achieve the German-Polish reconciliation. I don't see that there are sufficient preconditions for that, also on the German side, I have to admit. But anyway, then in her career, you also see a very strong focus on German, Polish, or German Eastern European relations. And I should mention 2 books. One of them has been published a couple of years ago. That is called Sündenfall der Intellektuellen, ein deutsch-französischer Streit von 1945 bis heute. So that would be Sündenfall, I would say, the sins of or Synthon of Intellectuals, German-French conflict from 1945 until today, and then there's another book, I will translate it directly, it's Which Freedom? Later Years for an Open Society, published very recently at a publishing house in Berlin. And please speak now. I should remind the speakers also, I've eaten up time myself now. We have 2 hours for this session. We are already running late, so if everybody could limit the statements to, let's say, between 15, maybe even 10 minutes. I know it sounds like a nuisance, but only then will we have some time to discuss, and that's why I propose that everybody tries to cut down the presentation.
Thank you for this invitation. I want to make some remarks to the cleavage, to the split of memory between Poland and Germany. Angela Merkel's recent confession that without Solidarność she would not be German Chancellor came just in time. It brought motion into the German-Polish relation, which in spite of all official denials and goodwill statements had become more and more frosty over the several years and months, at times even virulently hostile. Mutual projections and sensitivities are showing how deep the wounds are lying, heritage of the totalitarian dictatorships of the 20th century. Especially in recent times, it seems that Poland's national conservative elite fired off polemics against Germany, not shying back from using the anti-German stereotypes of olden communist propagandas accusing Germany as revanchism, as to displaced populations, falsification of history, and finally at attempts of Germanization. With her statement about Solidarność, Angela Merkel also touched one of the great political misunderstandings as to her social democrat predecessor office in the German Federal Republic in the 80s. Then, at a time when greater parts of the West German population showed sympathy for Solidarność in the Polish summer 1981, the reactions of the political class and many intellectuals were utterly reluctant. In the beginning, there was a certain benevolence for the workers and union movements, but Solidarności's growing anti-communist character was carried by the pathos of self-liberation from communist predominance, was met with growing skepticism. Let alone the support of the Catholic Church and the Polish Pope. The Pope's fifth colonne, Solidarność was called derogatorily. So the violent suppression of the Polish democratic movement and the imposition of martial law in December 1981, other than in the Soviet invasion in Prague 1968, did not spark any bigger protests. At that time, protests in West Germany were directed against the deployment of the American Pershing II rockets, and big rallies were held for peace. The topic peace in the early 80s was also on the agenda of the Bonner policy and was closely tied to the term of stability. Shortly before martial law was imposed in Poland, the then Chancellor Helmut Schmidt had an exchange of thought with Manfred Stolpe, then official representative of the Protestant Church of the German Democratic Republic. In a top-secret classified notice of the Ministry of Staatssicherheit, Schmidt is quoted to have said he could understand when the Soviet Union got involved because as a leading power they had to keep their business clean. Straight after the imposition of the martial law, having visited Honecker in the GDR, Helmut Schmidt told a journalist, I quote, "Mr. Honecker is as consternated as myself that this has been necessary." Consequently, there were no protest notes from the official Bonn. Not interference into real socialist societies was seen as a rational principle. Interference as a destabilization factor to such society. Also, the Polish spark could spread easily into other countries. Günter Gauss, the social democratic East politician, said in 1983, I quote, "Polish state of affairs as having had in recent years such Polish affairs in Middle Germany, Polish affairs in the sense of the old and ugly metaphor, this would be the eve of war in Europe." Gauss has been wrong. The victory of the Central European democratic movements, like the victory of Solidarność over communism, has not provoked the war. The revolutions were carried out astonishingly peacefully. After 1989, by and by, the frozen in memory below the former Iron Curtain began to rise, and what had been pushed aside came forward. Different cultures of remembrance began to collide, national identities started moving, myths collapsed, others established themselves. In any case, debates started, tearing at the taboos of the respective national histories, asking questions, eroding the officially political correct status of a brotherly united Europe. The debate about the expulsions in Europe was started in the 19th as the war in disintegrating Yugoslavia, with its consequences, flight and expulsion of hundreds of thousands with all its pain and misery, gave a fresh example to the world. The Yugoslavian refugees recalled own memories. In Germany, a debate started if it was allowed or politically incorrect, considering the National Socialist atrocities, to remember the own victims of war, expulsion and pains in the past. A few years ago, the first freely elected Polish minister-president and former dissident Tadeusz Mazowiecki had talked about the German-Polish companionship of shame, which should give a lesson. It has begun. Also, when till 1989, same as in the former GSFR, the expulsion of the Germans in Pommern, Silesia and East Prussia was censored, ideologic or tabooed in the communist discourse and official historiography. Before 1990 in Poland, same as in the German Democratic Republic, a public discussion on the issue was not possible. In the official version of the expulsion of the Germans was a rightful punishment for the crimes of the National Socialists. Till to today, I think a big part of the Polish population and the political class share this opinion. There were a few official apologies in the past as to the sufferings of innocent victims and the crimes during expulsion. For example, as 1965, the letter of the Polish bishops, or regretting remarks by the foreign ministers Kubiszewski in 1990 or Bartoszewski in 1995. In principle, though, it was stated that the expulsion had been an unavoidable evil, thus referring to the stance of the Allies who had accepted the shifting of Poland's border to the west, the expulsion of Poles from East Poland in order the expulsion of the Germans. So Poland had not been a driving force, it had been the surely afflicted object. The late literature historian and publicist Jan Józef Lipski was one of the first who, out of the ranks of the dissidents, broke the taboo about the expulsion of the Germans. In his famous essay, which was published in 1981, about the two fatherlands, to patriotism, he states, I quote, "The evil which was done to us, also the worst evil, is however no justification and must not be such for the evil which we ourselves have done to others. The expulsion of human beings from their homeland can, in the best case, be a minor evil, never so a good deed." 1989, he provoked his fellow countrymen anew, I quote, "We have to make clear to the Germans that the crimes of the National Socialists have left a lasting trace in Polish mentality, and to the Poles we have to make clear that driving people out of their homes was an injustice too. In the last years, Poland courageously took on debating national myths. So the dispute of Polish historians about the massacre of Jedwabne. The passionate debate centered about the self-image of the Poles as victim nation and its two visions of identity, the civil and the nationalist. With the rapprochement of the two neighboring states also due to the European Union, the official Germany and Poland installed uncountable bilateral, highly subventioned historian commissions. Joint editions and school book projects seem to show the reconciliation between Poland and Germany at last. But then the debate about this center against expulsions provoked a new storm of two different memories ardently opposed each of them. The vehement intervention by the Polish intellectuals showed the old fear which had seemed to be led by and now a new relapse into bizarre and old-time ideological schemes of thinking. So, for example, the same Marshal Marek Jurak demanded to call the expulsion of the Germans relocation from now on, this old communist term. After the German unification and the extension of the European community to the east, the remembrance of Holocaust and Gulag still divides the continent of East and West. The cleavage of memories does not only show up in the debates about expulsions of the last century, it also marks a different relation towards the USA, as a debate about the engagement in the Iraq war showed. A deep cleavage ran through Europe. Remembrance, however, is not only divided along the former curtain. Factions and cuts also go through the own country. In Poland, as shown, the actual discussions about the law, about the illustration. In the same way, the Gaukbehörde, the German institution for the documents of the state security of the former GDR, since its establishing has brought on inner German debates about the necessity of its existence. Opening the files would divide and disturb the process of unification. Every other year, the shutting down of the institution is demanded. In spite of this, over the years, a wider consensus had been reached, however, as to giving possibility for research in the files and bringing light into the dark facts of the life in the GDR. A new political line, the new political line of the Kaczynski brothers is in this respect not more radical than the ruling of the German authorities after the Wende. It seems to have become clear in Poland that the final stroke, the big line under the communist past, as demanded Mazowiecki and Michnik and others, would not keep forever and was opposed to reassessing the past as the suppressed tense come back, because there is no democracy without memory. By and by, the process of recollection has been started. It opens the chance to bring light into the experiences and entanglement of both totalitarian dictatorships of the last century. This very painful process reaches deep into the relation between Poles and Germans. However, it also points out and brings back to consciousness the uprisings for freedom in the divided Europe after 1945 and the violent crushing. A perspective is now open to see a line from the fight for freedom of June 1953 in Berlin, the Quilt Revolution in Hungary, 1956, the spring 1986 in Prague, the Polish summer 81, and at least the victory of democracy in 1989. This line of uprisings against the totalitarian regimes form a coherence, a tradition of anti-totalitarian history in Europe, and a recognition of the fact that freedom cannot be divided. Exactly this point Angela Merkel made with her statement that without Solidarność she would not be German Chancellor, pointing out the importance of the uprising in Poland as a key moment of the whole of Europe. There is no freedom, so without dissenting either. We should not be afraid to exchange in arguments and quarrels. They are a vital part in a lively relationship and makes reconciliation possible. Let me end with one personal remark. My mother is born in Masurian, was born in Masurian. My grandmother was living there, and in 1945 they have to leave, bought the frozen half their home, and in 76 we made vacancies in Poland to look for this house in which she was born, and I met some guys there in Poland, and we become friends, and that's several guys who are at the beginning of the call, and so I learned Polish a little bit, and that was my beginning to get in contact with the beginnings of Solidarność. And afterwards I was a little bit, I transported several books and other things between the Iron Curtain, each other to Prague and to Poland and so on. And I think this combination that I have several roots to Poland over my grandmother, and then afterwards a revitalization with other guys there. They met. That's my how to say it. That's my that's a little bit my roots in Poland. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to New York, and I'm very glad that I can share my views on the German-Polish relations in such a distinguished place and with such a distinguished audience. What I'm going to do in my hopefully not longer than 20 minutes presentation is basically to address one issue which I find very exciting, which is the role the past has played in the public and political discourse, both in Germany and Poland, in the recent years. And I think there in the last decade at least, there has been a lot of change in this respect in both countries, and it's probably not accidentally that in the same time the political tensions and disagreements over memory issues emerged in the German-Polish relationship. Mrs. Ackermann has already addressed some of them in her presentation, and which strongly overshadowed this bilateral relationship. And I would like to look in my presentation at how the changing modes of so-called public use of history in Poland and Germany have contributed to the problem of or to problems in general in the mutual understanding of the elites in Poland and Germany. And it's quite an obvious fact that the Germans and Poles talk today in the matters of memory, history, increasingly at cross purposes. Aneinander vorbei, you would say in German probably. To begin with, I subscribe to the opinion that over the last decade, Polish and German cultures of remembrance have become increasingly disparate and incompatible with each other. And this phenomenon has been sometimes explained by reference to the allegedly contradictory national narratives about the past. But I don't think, however, that this would be the right approach to understand the current confusion, the German-Polish dialogue. Instead, I'm arguing that it is rather the way how history in general, not only the German-Polish history, is used and remembered in the public spheres of both countries, which provides for mutual disappointments and, even more importantly, mutual misperceptions. I'm going to proceed in two steps. First, I would like to briefly analyze three aspects of the changing culture and politics of memory in Germany, which are depoliticization of the memory of the Third Reich. second, pluralization of the culture of memory, and finally, the cosmopolitanian tendency in the German memory, which I phrase this way. And my argument is that these developments contradict largely the direction in which the Polish debate is heading to, which is the main source of misperceptions and disagreements in the Polish-German dialogue. I would like to look at this problem in the second part of my presentation. As to the German culture of memory, let me first explain what I mean by the depoliticization. I think that 20 years after the Historikerstreit, the famous dispute of historians over the place of Holocaust and Nazi past in the German identity, the political function of this memory is flowing. It's not necessary to remind you that from the mid-80s on, at the latest, Holocaust and the culture of guilt were widely recognized as the founding myths of the political culture in German Federal Republic. Not only was this reference to the past used as a moral obligation to remember, it also served as a political instruction how to act, both in the domestic and international arenas. In the federal structure, politics of reconciliation with the neighbors, European integration, deployment of German troops abroad, and so on and so forth, all of these central aspects of the German political culture were clearly and directly linked to Auschwitz, and justified by the commitment to the German responsibility originating from this crime of the century. I'm arguing that this highly politicized nature of this memory, as well as its interventionist role, is clearly in retreat. It is certainly the generational change and the passing away of those for whom the Nazi time was a life experience and life burden at the same time, which makes this depoliticization happen. But it's not to deny that the lesson of Auschwitz, as a political instruction, so to say, is also no longer useful to meet the real challenges the Berlin Republic faces nowadays. Let me give you just a few examples. German troops are deployed all over the world, not despite or because of the German past, but due to Germany's responsibility in the international community and expectations of her alliance. The question of deeper integration in Europe cannot be dealt with in terms of the peace or war terminology any longer. Also, the anti-fascist slogans are not appropriate anymore as the only strategy against the radical right, since they do not address the real origins of this phenomenon, which is the socio-economic malaise in the former GDR. And the second aspect is that this depoliticization comes along with a shift of interest in the period of 1933-45 from the political arena to the family history, media, or even entertainment, as the comedy about Hitler shows. One can call it a privatization of memory. What used to be a central motif of the public sphere has been, to a certain extent, transformed into the private property of the individuals who are free to develop their own, much more subjective and personalized narratives about the past. The debate over the expulsions, German victims of the bomb war, as well as the booming market of the books dealing with the family history, are the most visible examples of this trend. Let me point out two important results of this development. First, it is the pluralization of the discourse about the past, in which many, sometimes contradictory, narratives takes place. Second, the breakdown of the only official and politically correct reference to the past, Auschwitz as a fundament of the German identity, makes possible also such modes of the public use of history which deliberately contest the so far prevailing discourse. And there is also a third feature of the new German discourse which should be briefly mentioned. It is the so-called cosmopolitan reading of the past. The cosmopolitan memory looks at the past events not primarily within their historical context, but from the universal civil and human rights perspective. As Daniel Levy and Nata Schneider remarked, in the cosmopolitanized form of memory, I quote, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and the Holocaust are becoming blurred into an apolitical and ahistorical event circumscribed by human rights as the positive force and nationalism as the negative one, end of quote. And especially in the German remembrance of expulsions, this approach comes strongly to the fore. It's quite widespread among many prominent actors of this debate, most notably on the left, for whom expulsion stops being a particular event and is being reframed as a universal evil called ethnic cleansing. All that, depoliticization, pluralization, and cosmopolitanization, stands for a transformation of the public use of history in the Berlin Republic. In general, the public discourse is less and less preoccupied with the period of 1933-45. It is increasingly focused on the new German past, which is the period after 1945. Most strikingly, what is at stake in the intellectual debates of the Berlin Republic is not the reinterpretation of the Nazi period, but that of the heritage of the 68 generation or of the decade of the 50s. As a matter of fact, the history after 1945 is not only getting politicized, but it's also used as a springboard of the new self-confidence and the so-called normality of the Berlin Republic. The speech of the federal president Horst Köhler on the 60th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, in which he talked with pride about the achievements of the German democracy, economy, and westernization, is a case in point of this attitude. Of course, the memory of Auschwitz and the collective responsibility stemming from the past is still a central motif of the German political culture, in which it is deeply ingrained. The harsh reactions of media and political class on the recent infamous speech given by Mr. Oettinger, the Prime Minister of Baden-Württemberg, at the funeral of a former Nazi servant whose biography Oettinger tried to whitewash, is a good example of it. Another is the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, of course. Nevertheless, drawing direct inspirations from the past for political action is no longer seen as a prerequisite of the raison d'etat. And let me now turn to the second part of my remarks to show what the disparity between the Polish and German discourses means. First, the process of reconciliation, as we know it from today's perspective, was not only part of a political strategy of both the unified Germany and democratic Poland, but it was also inconceivable without a specific constellation of Polish and German political cultures. On the German part was the strong politicization of memory, arguably an indispensable foundation of this process. By the end of the 90s, about 75% of the German elite supported, according to a study, the Polish accession to the EU because of the evil inflicted by the Germans on Poland in the past. In view of the aforementioned changes in the public use of history in Germany, it can be argued that it was the last moment when this kind of motivation played any significant role. However, it would be not yet a reason for the German and Polish cultures of memory to go apart if some important evolution did not take place in the Polish discourse too. While the German memory of the Second World War is more and more shifting towards the private sphere, the use of history is getting political in Poland. In the 90s, the elite discourse on the past was generally very self-critical, let's say liberal, or prone to accept the other's point of view. History was perceived by the liberal elites not as a political asset, but as a space of ethically informed dialogue. This critical patriotism, as it is called, was an indispensable prerequisite for the Polish-German realignment after 1989, as the latter could only have been legitimated by the public opinion and the elites if the negative attitudes towards Germany had been reduced. By the way, the requirements for a Polish-German rapprochement were completely different on the German side. Because this realignment, German-Polish relations, fit neatly into the traditional concept of German foreign policy after 1945 as a civilian power, and did not pose any challenge from the point of view of the acceptance in the elites of society. This is why it was not accompanied by a massive intellectual engagement with Poland, which is a major source of the Polish-German asymmetry. But the anti- or apolitical reasoning about the past in Poland has been repudiated since the Jedwabne debate. The exaggerations of self-criticism, as it was phrased, in the Jedwabne debate, but also in the debate about the expulsion of Germans, as well as the ethical character of the elite discourse, on memory have been then criticized as not taking care of the political and national community, which should be based upon a common and principally positive narrative about the Polish past. According to this philosophy, memory is a political issue because its role is to define the foundation of the political community. Since the Jedwabne debate, a tendency to get the history back to the public sphere and give it a political quality, not at least by means of a state-coordinated politics of memory or historical policy, has gained a lot of ground. One of the aspects of this evolution is a stronger emphasis on the use of history as a means of foreign policy. The bargaining over interpretations of the past is given as much importance as other classical, so to say, foreign policy issues. This should not come as a surprise, since as this argument goes, memory is about power, not morality. And here we come to the Polish-German conundrum. And first, the tendency to use the historical arguments in the German-Polish political debate and appeal to the German awareness of guilt is faced with an increasingly depoliticized German culture of memory in which these arguments do not count anymore. Not only paves it the way for irritations in the bilateral dialogue, but is also a source of misperceptions. The decline of the German elites who talk with the Poles about history in political terms is interpreted as a dramatic revision of the German national narrative about the past as such. At the same time, the Polish claim to make the Germans more aware of what the Polish history in the 20th century was about is confronted with the German skepticism, as it is not fitting into the way how history is reflected upon in the Berlin Republic. In result, these attempts are in Germany discredited as nationalist and archaic. And no doubt this problem forms a considerable challenge for the Polish politics of memory, which is meant to demand the recognition of the Polish point of view and the Polish-German battle over memory. The German and Polish debates are simply out of sync. The circumstances under which messages sent by the Polish memory policymakers would have been able to reach the German audience were certainly given about 20 or 30 years ago, when lively debates on the German guilt and responsibility were going on. At that time, was Poland, however, felt non-existent in the German debate, the reason being, of course, the Cold War. Today, this conducive environment is not in place anymore. Second, also the pluralization of the German discourse on memory provokes the Polish-German misperceptions. In fact, the prevalent Polish reading of this process is quite different, partly because it is largely looked at through the lens of the Polish experience, and thus its picture is a projection of what Polish elites think of themselves. As a result, the debate on the German victims of the Second World War is not seen as one of many narratives in the German newly pluralistic discourse about the past. It is rather interpreted as a major transformation of the narrative, national narrative, which is, according to this perception, now getting more and more nationalistic, self-centered, and is turning away from the fundamentals of the German culture of guilt and responsibility. The nation of culprits is being replaced with the concept of nation of victims. This is how this argument goes. Third, not surprisingly, cosmopolitanism is not a form of memory which is approached with a great amount of enthusiasm in Poland either. Since memory is defined as a political issue, an interpretation of history in terms of such universal categories like human or civil rights would deprive the national community of an important asset. It is particularly problematic for Poland, whose historical experience is not, as it's argued, enough acknowledged in Europe, most notably in Germany. This is why, for example, the concepts of Europeanization of memories, of expulsion, under the generalizing heading of ethnic cleansing, are renounced by the Polish elites. Apart from that, it is the particularity of the Polish history in general, which is at the heart of the today's Polish discourse on memory, and not its universal aspects. It is possibly a proper strategy to strengthen the feeling of national togetherness. It is, however, clearly a source of contention in the dialogue with this part of the German elite, which follows the cosmopolitan way of thinking. And to round up this presentation, I would like to come back to the initial statement that the Polish and German elites increasingly talk with each other at cross purposes. The American Heritage Dictionary of Idioms explains this expression as follows, I quote, "It comes from a parlor game called cross purposes, in which a series of subjects or questions were divided from their explanations or answers and distributed around the room. Players then created absurdities by combining a subject taken from one person with an explanation taken from another." And whereas I do not want to use it as an overall metaphor explaining the current state of the German-Polish dialogue on the past, I think that my remarks give some justification for invoking this idiom. And apart from that, it's hopefully enough provocative to stir up some debate. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank for the invitation for this conference. It's a great honor for me to be here with you. And several weeks ago, we organized a conference in Warsaw. Warsaw Rising Museum, in cooperation with some other institutions, including German Historical Institute led by Professor Zimmer, who is present with us here. And I must confess that the atmosphere of this conference was much more heated. The debate was much more heated at that time. Maybe the precondition of such calm discussion is to move such discussions from Warsaw and Berlin to such a neutral ground like New York is. Probably is the best precondition for achieving such a goal. Next time Tokyo, even much more neutral, maybe even familiar. I would like to make some remarks because the time is running out. I would like to start with an observation that I'm doing this observation that as a political philosopher and historian, that every political body needs its own narrative. And because of this, past is one of the sources of legitimation of political systems. Forms of remembrance and shapes of social memory are important factors for democracy. And the European Union, although its identity is still ambiguous, is a kind of political body. Not political community, but I would use this term, political body. So it also needs its own narrative, rooted in the past. Last example of an attempt to present something like a common narrative of the past for this European project was Berlin Declaration. And in Berlin Declaration was pointed out that Europeans overcome centuries of their past full of rifts and conflicts, and implicit in the sentence was the fact that these rifts were wars, mutual hatred, and nationalism. But I think that the fact that Spanish Habsburgs waged wars against Protestants in 17th century Netherlands are totally irrelevant for contemporary Europeans. What matters is World War II and the remembrance of World War II, because it's the turning point in European history and the real source of the idea of European integration. So these wars, rifts, and conflicts, they're actually concerning our remembrance of last war. Or, in broader sense, the 20th century. The 20th century, that was the century of 2 world wars. So, if World War II is in the very center of our interests, its origins, its course, its consequences, it is a crucial point in European narrative concerning past. And here the role of Germany is crucial too, because German memory of the 20th century and their own narratives about World War II are very important for Europe as a whole. Because Germans started this war, or Nazi Germany, And because of this, it was so important for Europe how Germans managed to cope with their own past and how answer to questions concerning the meaning of this great historical drama. And from Polish perspective, the main answer that was given by Germans to this problem was that the main culprit was nationalism. Nationalism, ethnic and racial hatred. Nationalism seen as a precondition of this hatred. So, for example, Jürgen Habermas and other German writers and philosophers, they're writing about post-historical and post-national identity that was created in Germany after the last war. And now Germans are proposing this kind of identity for new countries that are joining the European Union, and they are proposing this post-national and post-historic platform as a founding stone of new identity for new European Union. But there are some problems with that, especially for newcomers, countries from Central Europe, and especially for Poland. I would like to point out 2 points. The most important one for me is that 20th century was not a century of nationalism in Polish perspective, but of 2 totalitarianisms. The 20th century was the century of totalitarianisms. It's the main experience of Poland or Poles and other nations living in the center of Europe during the 20th century. And it was the most devastating experience for these nations. We have seen scenes on television screens in last weeks from Tallinn in Estonia, for example, the riots over the decision to dismantle the monument for Soviet soldiers. We have quarrels with Russia not only about the remembrance of World War II, but for example, in last several weeks there was a problem about an exhibition in Auschwitz Death Camp Museum, because Russians, they have for many years a permanent exhibition that was organized during communist times, and now they try to introduce some panels with information that people from eastern part of Poland that was incorporated in Soviet Union were counted as Soviet victims of this concentration camp. So it was this way of thinking if the Ribbentrop-Molotov Treaty would have been a legal international act of international law. So it's absolutely unacceptable for Poland. There are many other such problems with dealing with this memory of the 20th century as a century of totalitarianisms. But the problem with Russia is that Putin's interpretation of World War II and its consequences is actually Stalinist one. It's a kind of echo of arguments that were used 40 or 50 years ago in Moscow. What more, criticism of that Russian perspective is presented by Moscow as a nationalism. I mean, Poles criticizing Moscow for doing that are accused of being nationalists. And unfortunately, there are many people in the West that who agree with that position presented by Moscow. And at every such meeting, when Poles and Germans meet together, there must be a chapter on Erika Steinbach. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say only this, that the problem with Steinbach, if we look at the whole century as the century of totalitarianisms, it goes much deeper than the problem only with her project. Because beneath this project is the idea that, I don't remember exactly the title of her exhibition that was presented at the Kronprinz Palace last year. Yes, but it was another part of this title, and it was something like Century of Expulsions or 100 Years of Expulsions or something like that. I mean, Century of Expulsions.
Century of Expulsions.
Yes. So it makes problem of expulsion the central problem with this tragic history of the 20th century. But from Polish perspective, there is no problem to acknowledge that Germans suffered after the expulsion. No, but the main problem is the remembrance of the 20th century. The 20th century was the century of totalitarianisms, not of expulsions. Because what was the cause and what was an effect? Totalitarianism was the cause, and expulsions had been effects of sufferings of millions of people all over the world. So, in the case of Steinbach, there is a disturbing fact for Poles that two symbols of the 20th century, especially in contemporary German narrative, might be only two facts: Holocaust and expulsions. From Polish perspective, it looks like that, so it is disturbing, actually. And there is another point, why this proposition of building post-historical and post-national identity, especially for Poland, is so difficult to accept. Polish way of understanding history is very, brief comment, but history for Poles is a moral drama. Moral drama is something that resembles our perspective on history, and it resembles American way of even messianism in a way. Moral drama, a never-ending one. And the real content of this drama is fight tyranny versus freedom. And this is why Poles were so interested in Ukrainian revolution, for example. This is the reason why Poles are interested in Belarus. It was the main source of dynamic of solidarity movement, because it was a great drama of fighting against tyranny. We were on the side of freedom and we are fighting against tyranny. And now we are supposed to help Ukrainians, Belarusians, and others to overcome such threat. In such perspective, democracy needs civic passion, civic virtues, even heroism and sacrifices. It needs, like Professor Kuniński said at the beginning of our conference, moral grounding. All these notions are very suspected in the eyes of our German friends because of this great work that was done after World War II in order to overcome this great and difficult legacy of World War II. All these ideas should be overcome and replaced with this post-heroic, post-historical identity. And it is very difficult, and it is a real stake of this whole process, because the whole process is, the identity is at stake, not only political interests, etc., etc. And it maybe explains why the Polish project of so-called historical policy or political history has been born several years ago. I would call it a kind of, in rather modest term, as a kind of communitarian correction to the ideas that prevailed in Poland at the beginning of the 90s. Professor Kuniński was talking about this. At the beginning of the 90s, there was the faith, especially among Polish liberals, that for having a strong and vital liberal democracy, only procedures, law, and institutions are enough. This is enough basis for having strong liberal democracy. But in that sense, his historical policy is an idea that liberal democracy needs moral grounding, and because of this, it has to have its own narrative also about the past. And of course, if it is a communitarian correction to this liberal project, to this Polish liberal project, it has to disturb German commentators, because it's full with all these notions that Germans think that they have overcome all these problems in the past. It was interesting because several weeks ago, during this conference that I told at the very beginning of my presentation, we invited to Warsaw several dozens of German students and organized workshops, also with insurgents from Warsaw Rising. And one of these former members of Home Army who fought in Warsaw Rising in 1944 said that the main reason for fighting for him was that he wanted to defend the dignity of his own nation. And the comment of one of the German students was that it resembles him a catchwords used by the Nazis in the 30s. I mean, there can't be the great dispatch between the mutual understanding of intentions. Conclusions. I think that German narrative is unique about the past, and it is a unique response to unique German experience of the 20th century. And because of this, every attempt of automatic implementation of this narrative must cause great problems, not only cultural, philosophical, but also political. And it is one of the reasons for the tensions in German-Polish relations in recent years. This is unique German answer to unique German challenge. And the second point is going back to Russia, because Poland is always between Germany and Russia. Polish situation now is very uneasy, and I would describe this situation as situation of a country that finds between post-historical Germany and very, in what marks historical Russia. So there's a very difficult situation, a very postmodern one, because on the one side we have a great neighbor which is post-historical, and on the other hand we have a great neighbor that is very historical and very, very deep-rooted in the 19th century, not even in the 20th century. So this is the main problem that on that field Poland must face in the future, in years that are coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. For now, more of a Polish perspective, because you also mentioned it a couple of times in your talk that something like this does indeed exist. And now we come to Basil Kierski. You can hear. I'm sorry, I will try to speak louder. I'm saying thank you very much for including also in this talk and the last talk. There was several times mentioning of a Polish perspective. I just said I was not sure whether this, in this whole sense, really exists, but we now got it. And now Basil Kierski, I got no notes about his CV, but it's unnecessary because he's very well known in Germany or in Berlin, where I live. He's publisher of the German-Polish magazine Dialog. It is published in 2 languages, in German and in Polish. And it's very inspiring to read, and he's the chief editor of that. He has published numerous other publicist, or you can also say academic essays and qualitative books. And well, that's for the introduction now. And well, I think similar to Piotr, he's I see him all around. If there's activities for German-Polish reconciliation or German-Polish relations. So he is an actor in that, but the difference or the speciality about him is that he comes from Poland and lives in Berlin and inspires us there since many years. So please.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this warm introduction. It's probably the most difficult presentation for me in my life. You're very tired. It's in the afternoon. I have the fourth presentation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share with you my reflections and also my personal experiences with the problem of the founding of a European memory culture from the German and Polish perspective. But I have to say that I will concentrate on the German perspective or on my German experiences with the development of the German public debate on communism and the Nazi dictatorship in the last 17 years. Ladies and gentlemen, many political observers and leaders, especially from Germany and Poland, underlined last months how important the dialogue on the collective historical experience is for the process of building a European identity, an identity parallel to national ones, not an alternative. Without a cultural identity, the EU will develop to a free trade zone. Without such a culture, without such an identity, there is a danger. There's not a danger. The idea of solidarity, the idea of responsibility of the Western world, Western European countries, for the faith of post-communist states is endangered. And I want to quote a Spanish writer, José Semprún. He underlined 2 years ago in Germany that the process of EU enlargement will be only successful if the two parts of the continent will be able to share their memories and will able to found a common understanding of history. And I quote José Semprún also for a second reason, which has something to do with our discussion on the Polish debates on Russia, Polish experiences on Russia. Jorge Semprún, he was prisoner in the Buchenwald concentration camp during the Second World War. Was also in the 80s Spanish Minister of Culture. He played a very important role for the export of Polish culture because he helped to publish a very important novel, A World Apart, Inny Świat, of Gustav Herrling in the mid-80s in France. It was a book that was published in the beginning of the 50s, first in England. The Gallimard editing house, Albert Camus especially, reflected or tried to publish it in the French translation, but it was not possible. It was not possible because a Polish victim of communism wrote a novel, autobiographic novel, about his experiences. And what is, I think, still very important, still interesting for us is it's a novel that shows a special form of Polish culture dealing with totalitarian experiences. It is full of empathy for Russians, for Russian victims. It's written from a perspective of, well knowing the Russian traditions, Russian culture. And on the other side, it understands that there's a second level, not one level, a second level of perception of Russia. That's the imperial tradition, the imperial politics of Russia. And I can quote also books and essays of Józef Czapski. These are, I think, very important, parts of Polish heritage, of Polish perspective on Russia that are still actual, still important, and show that Poland has no xenophobian attitude, a superficial xenophobian attitude when it's analyzing Russian political culture, but it is able, yes, to bring to common a respect for Russian culture and, well, and a criticism towards its political traditions. Well, my first thesis, and I will have 4 of them, is the following. From my very small bilateral Polish-German perspective, I experience a lot of developments in this process of building a European or a common memory or culture of memory, which are worrying me, which are frustrating. But I wanted to start with a larger perspective, yes, a European one. I think from this larger European perspective, I don't think that the German-Polish relations in this subject are the main conflict line. I convinced, and I will show you, that we have also very large potentials. We made a lot of experiences of cooperations and of real sharing of experiences that are stabilizing the bilateral German-Polish relations. But I want to show you a very frustrating experience I made last week in Genshagen. That's a castle near Berlin. It's owned by a private foundation that is devoted to the cooperation between Germany, France, and Poland. And this foundation invited Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the former French president, to a roundtable discussion with the German and Polish experts on the current debate on the European Constitution and the impact of the French elections on the European integration. The former president opened this discussion with a 40-minute speech. Not only my Polish, but especially my German colleagues were really shocked. He only talked about the Franco-German motor, no word about the impact of the enlargement process on European integration, no word about, yes, new forms of cooperations, of influences. It was, the old political landscape. It was a new lesson in old Europe, I would say. And he showed the conviction that the old mechanism, especially the Franco-German cooperation, are still effective, are still the most important. My German colleagues, not the Polish one, asked him about Poland and the chances of the cooperation between Germany, Poland, and France. And I was surprised because he was very honest. His answer was very honest. He said, well, the Weimar cooperation was a mechanism bringing Poland closer to Europe. It has no importance today. Because this form of cooperation is isolating big European countries like Spain and Italy. And they're probably much more important than Poland. And he indicated that we don't need, or France and Germany, don't need a special relationship with Poland, and that the Franco-German motor is still crucial for Europe as an isolated phenomenon. And I want to tell you something about his knowledge of history. It was also very superficial. Polish history for him was the love affair between Napoleon and Maria Walewska. And it was a French historian dealing with German and Polish history from a younger generation that told me, the problem is that it was not only the performance of Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, that this was a performance not only of the older generation of French political elite, but it was representative also for the younger one and for the current candidates. And he voted in the first round by François Bayrou. He quoted Nicolas Sarkozy's understanding of political history, French history. Sarkozy taught that France should stop autocritical reflections on history. The context was the debate not only about collaboration but also decolonialization. It is still the homeland of the Enlightenment, the idea of Enlightenment, and not the nation, and that was interesting, not the nation that invented genocide. So, I think it's very important to have also this European perspective if we talk about German-Polish problems. And Ulrike Ackermann quoted the speech of Angela Merkel at the Warsaw University in the mid of March. I was really surprised, and I think that she surprised also a Polish host with a confession that her political biography after '89 is an effect of the freedom movement in Poland. Without solidarity, the fall down of the Berlin Wall was not possible, and also her political biography is an effect of the solidarity movement. This form of deep understanding for how connected the German and Polish history are, how important Poland for the unification was, is, and I'm convinced, representative for large parts of liberal democratic elites in Eastern Germany. But I have to be precise. I don't mean the whole Eastern German society. I don't mean large parts and very influential parts of the post-communist elites and their voters. And I think it was Paweł Zalewski that quoted this word of the reconciliation kitsch and the dialogue, not only the official one, I think, between Eastern Germany and Poland was a form of kitsch, or it was a form of not to speak about the past. And I think that this shadow is still presented, and the nostalgia of post-communist, communist nostalgia in a very important element of this nostalgia in Eastern Germany is also a nostalgia for times where there were no critical, autocritical discussions about responsibility for German history. This consciousness, this sensibility of Angela Merkel, I think you can find especially in some influential public and private initiatives and institutions dealing with the communist past. I mean German one, they are looking for cooperation with Polish partners. They are interested also in the exchange of knowledge, are interested in, well, a comparative analysis of GDR history, the transformation process in Eastern Germany with other post-communist countries. I have here a long list of initiatives. I will present you some of them. The first one that was mentioned, it's very important, that's the special committees of the Bundestag in the 90s. They dealt not only with the inner German transformation process and the German form of dealing with the communist past. The main subject was Polish, or the experience of other nations with communism, the relations of the GDR, the role of the Stasi also in the relations with these countries, and what was very important also, to share experiences dealing with the communist past. I don't have to tell you, most of you know this, the cooperation of the Federal Commissioner for the Records of the Stasi with the IPN, with Polish institutions. It's very interesting that the new chief of the research department is a representative of a younger generation. He's 37, 38, is an historian from the GDR, who is interested in a form of narrative on communism experiences, which is not only orientated on the GDR. He was and is influenced strong by the Polish perspective. And I want to tell you also some words about the work of the foundation that is dealing with the communist past, SED Aufarbeitungsstiftung, and this week they published in the weekly Tygodnik Powszechny and the Catholic Weekly a supplement in Polish language on the problem of Eastern German experiences with communism, with the dealing of the communist past. And it's the second one, a second supplement of a series. It's not only concentrated on German-Polish experiences. The first one, symbolically, was on Charta 77. It was on Czechoslovakia. So it is very important for me to show you this form of cooperation, this form of sensibility, because after that I wanted to tell you or to share some experiences, observations on the development of the German debate on of the Nazi past. But let me tell you also something about this problem of sensibility. The attitude of Angela Merkel is unfortunately not representative for large parts of German elite. Even those of them, and that is tragic, even those of them who were active long before 1989 confessed that Polish-German history traditionally played a marginal role in politics and what is important in political thought. I made 2 years ago an interview with Bernhard Vogel. It's a conservative politician. He was engaged as a Catholic in the reconciliation process very early in the 70s with Poland. He met 72 the Bishop of Krakow, Karol Wojtyła, and his confession was very shocking for me. And this interview was made for a book on the impact of the letter of bishops of '65 on German-Polish relations. And he told us, he confessed that we only believed that the Franco-German reconciliation and the dialogue with Moscow are crucial for us, will have a major impact on our international position, on the faith of the German nation. We did not expect any important initiatives, developments, or ideas coming from Poland. Not in '65, when this letter was published. It was a political initiative, not only a theological one. And then it was interesting, not in '78, when Wojtyła was elected Pope. And even in 1980, during the foundation of the Solidarity movement, our political fantasy, our imagination was very limited. And this is someone who was really very active in the Polish-German dialogue. Let's come to the second part and last part. Large parts of Polish public opinion became worried about the development of German debate on the Second World War, an effect of the intense perception of Jörg Friedrich's book *The Fire* on the bombing, Allied bombing, and the large interest of German on the faith of German ex-police. May polls asked, are Germans now perceiving themselves only as victims of war? Is the reflection about political collective responsibility for the NS regime marginalized? And my first answer is very clear. I don't think that that's the point. That's not the problem. What I observed is the following thing. First, the unification of Germany meant also a renaissance of a debate on Holocaust, on German responsibility for war crimes. It was the first time after the war when a unified, democratic German public opinion could discuss these questions. Don't forget, in the last 15, 17 years, we had such intense debates like on the Goldhagen book, the collective responsibility, on anti-Semitism, or the tradition of anti-Semitism, the idea of destruction. We had an intense debate on the memorial landscape, the Holocaust monument. We had an intense and in its quality a new debate on Wehrmacht crimes. And we had a debate on forced labor. And it was interesting to see that the first reaction of the German public was, do they mean the Jewish forced labor? And they had to learn that we meant Polish one, Polish Catholics also forced to labor. It was a very important process also of learning history in the last years. And the last book of Götz Ali, a Berlin historian, Der Volksstaat, about the participation of large parts of German society in stealing Jewish property. It's a new one. So we have very intense, classical, I would say, debates on the problem of responsibility. But, and now I'm coming to those tendencies that are frustrating for me, worries me. At the same time, and Piotr Buras thought about it, also Dariusz Gawin, we have the problem of the development of the interpretation of the Second World War, of the main experiences of the Second World War. I will mention two of them. The first one was mentioned, the Holocaust as an abstract experience, the Holocaust as an experience without cultural context. I'm sure that most German and most European probably don't understand that half of the 6 million Jewish victims had a Polish cultural context. I know what I'm telling about because one part of my family, one part was classically, traditionally conservative Catholic, the other one was Jewish one from Lemberg, Lvov, Galicia. They were assimilated. They didn't believe in 1939, and in the statistics or in the official New European narrative on Holocaust, they are part of a large European abstract group of victims, and I'm sure that nobody understands that with the destruction of these people, also a large tradition of the Polish Rzeczpospolita, a multicultural Rzeczpospolita in Lemberg, Lvov was destroyed. It is absent. But Piotr Buras talked a lot about this. The second problem is the problem of the narrative of the Wehrmacht crimes and the problem with the Wehrmacht exhibition. You know, it was a very intense debate, very important debate. My problem with the Wehrmacht exhibition was that Dariusz Gawin mentioned. First of all, it was an exhibition only about the time 41-45, without dealing the war crimes of the Wehrmacht between 39 and 41. And the second thing, you mentioned it, the problem, well, which territories we mean? Soviet one, by definition, of Hitler-Stalin Pact, or former Polish one? And how important this thing is, you can observe in Berlin. In Berlin, you have it's a beautiful park. It's not my thesis, it's a very important thesis, I think, of Norbert Frey about the development of German memory. Norbert Frey, a German historian, guided to the following problem. Today, the German witnesses of the war were children of the war. The voice of the culprits, or the living testimony of the culprits, is absent. And that means not that the atmosphere in the media changed. The media are, you know it quite well from the United States and also for Poland, is obsessively interested in presenting witnesses, testimony of witnesses. These are mostly today children. But what is very important also, I am sure that the atmosphere in the intergenerational relations, conflicts, also changed in Germany. And Norbert Frey described it as a tendency to mild judgment, die Tendenz zum milden Urteil. Let me comment two things. The first one, and I will finish then. The first one was the thesis of Paweł Zalewski, that we have a contradiction between Germany and Poland in the memory of the war. The Polish one, collective, national, collective, and the German one, individual. And the second point, I will tell something to, not to Frau Steinbach, but the problem of, and the tradition of her narrative. First of all, I don't know. I liked very much your presentation, Mr. Zalewski, but I don't agree with you. I would say it in another words. I would analyze the German problem from another perspective. I think that since 1945, you have in Germany a classical political conflict of two perspectives. The first one is that you mentioned, the individual one, and the second one is, I would say it's the reflection, or it's a proposal, the idea of dealing with past, with Nazi past, that Karl Jaspers proposed in 1945. Karl Jaspers, the German philosopher, told that first you have different levels of guilt. You have different authorities of guilt. The personal one, the individual one. Well, the criminal guilt, that's very important. A German emigrant coming back to Germany is not responsible for crimes. He taught about the moral guilt, about the metaphysic guilt, and the authorities for these guilts were, well, sometimes in the example of metaphysic guilt, only the God. In the case of criminal guilt, the courts. But that was very important what he said. There is also another logic, another level of guilt. That's the political guilt. And political guilt means that the whole German country, community, that wants to build a democratic society has a responsibility. There is a collective form of guilt. Though you as a person, you as an individual, don't have anyone. And I'm convinced that between 1945 and today, you have a conflict between these very complex perspectives, but a perspective that was very important for German foreign policy, especially during Willy Brandt's when Willy Brandt was a chancellor. He was a victim of the Nazi regime, but he saw his responsibility for German history. And on the other side, you have a very strong traditional with a contradictive perspective. And I was really shocked to read some days ago a book of Peter Reichel, it's a German political scientist, on the politics, on the tradition of dealing with the Nazi past in the first 2 decades after the Second World War. And I was shocked that not only the old elites, not only conservative elites in the Western democratic federal republic used this perspective of individual guilt, but also large parts of anti-Nazi politicians like Carlo Schmid of immigrants from the left, SPD, and from the conservative side. And their idea was to bring back the majority of the society, back to the German democracy. And I'm coming to Mrs. Steinbach. The problem of Mrs. Steinbach has a large importance because Frau Steinbach, in all aspects of her work, represents this tradition, very strong tradition. It is still very strong in conservative parts of the CDU. Piotr Buras mentioned the Oettinger debate, but it's not the only fact why she has such an influence. I would like to mention also some other factors. First of all, what I mentioned, the change of the generations, the problem that Norbert Frey mentioned, the mild judgment, and then other perspective of the younger generation towards their grandfathers and grandmothers. The second one, I will finish. The second one is what Piotr mentioned, the international debate on genocide, the German debate on the new role and new responsibility of German foreign policy, especially the role that the United Germany played in the Balkans, and the search for legitimacy to fight genocide. And the idea of comparing expelled faith with genocide is an old one. You have it since 1950s, since the Charter of Expelled. And I would add also a very important, crucial one. Since the 50s, you have, unfortunately, a federal cultural policy of the German government who is focusing on German heritage in the East, and it has a strong ethnic perspective on the German heritage in the East. And all these factors came together in the last year and made Frau Steinbach and her project so important for the political culture and for the German-Polish relations. What worries me mostly is the lack of knowledge in the German and also in the Polish public opinion about the traditions Frau Steinbach is represented. I didn't hear any important critical voices on the Charter of expellees from the 50s. Nobody said that half of them were old elites, mostly don't understand that it was a form of interpretation of history without dealing with the problem of Holocaust and the responsibility of Germany on the Holocaust. So, okay, my time is over. I will finish now. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well to the fourth speaker. Since time is passing by fast, I just will not make any conclusionary remarks and open it to the floor. So please, questions and statements. Okay, let's start with that. Okay. Try to know. Please go ahead.
I have a question related to what Buras said. A bit louder. Speak up.
Yeah, really loud.
So I have a question related to what Piotr Buras said in his presentation, because I would like to understand it correctly. Why do you pose this delimitation, these differences on political and non-political, if you compare the memory culture in Germany and in Poland now? I ask it because it seems to me not an appropriate delimitation, because if I take the praxis in Germany, it seems to me that this memory culture is very political. For example, you have this school book, German-French school book on history. You have this political history made by Schroeder regarding the anniversary of 1944 D-Day, for example, Stauffenberg. You have a lot of films, exhibitions, which create the whole debate, and last but not least, it seems to me that the post-historical and cosmopolitical approach can be a highly political project also. So I would like to ask you to explain it more. What do you mean by non-political, political?
Okay, we'll collect a couple of questions, please, Mr.
Yes, one remark to Bartkiewski and the role of Angela Merkel. I would say, if we compare this with Giscard d'Estaing, you criticized. The problem with Merkel is that, you know, that there were great hopes in Poland that she will change the German politics. But, you know, now she changed rhetoric, words. We are waiting for deeds, yeah? This is the question. And there are really very often as a misunderstanding. I appreciate, you know, the questions of the communist past, yeah? But we see this also very difficult. One example is, you know, misunderstanding of causa Geremek. Yeah, we just had a small discussion, private discussion with Mr. Merkel. Yeah, but the other is what you mentioned. You mentioned, for instance, Tygodnik Powszechny, that they published this. As you know, because you know the Polish political debates. Tygodnik Powszechny was stronghold against the politics of memory of communism. Yeah, well, some symbolic, but you know, no illustration, not really dealing with the past, because the former inner minister of Mazowiecki, Krzysztof Kozłowski, is the chief redactor, and then so on. Yeah. And now, also remark to Piotr Buras. I think that I must say I don't agree with your description of the change. I think that the Third Polish Republic was, you know, Habermasian. It was applied Habermas. It was like, you know, like the Polish elites, in the time in which Habermas himself ceased to believe in on his theories, like constitutional patriotism. I know him since 30 years or something like that. Yeah? Whereas at the time, as in Germany, it has changed, but changed in a totally different direction according to me. You know, I know Germany since late 70s. Maybe this is differences of the perspective of time. I would say for me, it became less plural, yeah? Because there is less self-critical. There are some exceptions, like, for instance, Norbert Frey, but you didn't quote it that he said, this is the end of the guild, yeah? As it's this new memory, yeah? Less cosmopolitan. We have this, you know, new kind of patriotism, and there's no. I think it's a politicization of the other aspect. You know, moving capital from Berlin, from Bonn to Berlin, it was all these buildings. You know, you can see the politics everywhere, also historical politics. In relation to Poland, it changed. I can only say, you know, when I was the first time in Germany, I was evidently victim. Yeah? Yeah? Today, I am perpetrator. Yeah? So nothing. It's a elite exaggeration, but it is. And what has changed? It has not changed. The change is in the liberal and left-wing circles. You know, I remember the German universities in which you couldn't mention, you know, the word Vertreibung or Vertriebene and so on and so on. You cannot deny that such a change happened. And this is, you know, you have to analyze this. I don't think, of course, this is not means that there is a back to the 30s and so on. But it has, the change is that this memory before so-called Verselbstständigung in the Bundesrepublik, a reconciliation of the left with the Federal Republic, was a critical instrument against the foreign policy of Germany and political culture of Germany. Today it ceased to play, to have this critical function. And this is a great change. And this is why this is less pluralistic today, as I remember in the Bonn Republic. Thank you.
Okay, there's a lot of questions. Now we'll turn over to this side, please. And then, thank you. But then I will close the list also because looking at the
When you look at the archival documents on when the Soviet army entered Poland in 1944, right behind it there was the NKVD internal security army that was supposed to secure the rear of the front as the Soviet army was moving toward Germany throughout Poland. And this NKVD internal security army established a system of so-called Soviet war commanders, which were essentially the local administration in Poland. And the security army was really the police, while the Soviet army was moving, toward Germany. So basically, that existed until late 1946, and at this time they were expelling of the Germans. So at this time, there were really no institutions in Poland that were controlled by the Poles, even by the Polish communists. The Polish communists were a committee first in Lublin and in Warsaw. They were issuing edicts, but they were not implemented because there was no administration to do it. And the Soviets had this security policy in the rear. So I want to know which exactly Polish institutions were participating in expelling the Germans, because I do not see this institutional responsibility.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Mr. Chairman, compared to the highly complex questions that I heard today from Dialect, my question is very simple and rather brief. And it touches somewhat on the subject of the expulsion of Germans in Poland. It is my understanding that recognition of the Oder-Neisse line also implies that Germany has given up any claims over the lost territory on its borders with Poland. It is also my understanding that at some point the German finance ministry was advising potential claimants that the Federal Republic has never renounced individual claims by Germans, and indicated that such claimants may petition the federal courts. I would appreciate to have some clarification of what I said, either from the panel or anyone in the audience, whether in fact this is true, and if so, does anyone know more as to what is the current status?
No, one could answer the two last questions actually directly, but let's still collect all our questions. Okay, so please go ahead.
I would just like to thank Peter Buras for his inspiring remarks, and my question goes a bit in the direction of those of Marek Cichocki. I agree, pluralization, I think it's taken place, but it's normal, because until the early 19th, fall of communism, reunification, there was a certain political correctness for several reasons, which did not allow the individual memories as they have come up ever since. So this pluralization is a normal process, and it's good, in my view as a historian, that takes place, but that doesn't mean that we only have individual responsibilities. Germany as a nation, as a state, has taken the responsibility of its history, and that has not changed. Second, cosmopolitization. I also think that's true, but I think it's something very closely linked to the institutions. Even here in New York, where I deal a lot with German-Jewish, American-Jewish relations, so also a lot of history questions. Here, if you go to the Westchester Holocaust Center, you will see them dealing with Rwanda, with Darfur, which shows that these institutions want to link politics today, want to play a role today. And that's, of course, a bit also the history of the association of the ex-police, which sort of, on the one side, has become historical. It has no role anymore in German politics, but which is looking for a sort of political role today. Third, that's where I have the problem, is depoliticization. I don't really see it. Of course, you're certainly right that turning away from German culture of guilt and responsibility. Guilt is a word, of course, Germans felt guilt, but Germans which will come into political office in the next years, born 60 years after the war, there will not be a feeling of guilt, but there can only be a feeling of responsibility. And that responsibility is still there in the same politicization as it has always been. If you look at the discussions of German participation and after the Lebanon war taking place, but it's not only linked to Israel. I think in this respect,
stronger than ever before.
That politicization still is there. And I read always that Mr. Krasnodębski is professor in Bremen. Sometimes I wonder if he's there. Apparently he lives in a different country. I don't see any German which would see him as a perpetrator.
Okay. Please, short questions because it's already 5:30, so we are already over time. And out of fairness for the next session and the speakers there, we should really finish this at 1:45. So 15 minutes over time, but no more. So please, short questions and to be fair of longer statements, please.
Yes, I have a question for Mrs. Ackerman, who wrote on Franco-German reconciliation. How far do you think that over recent years, the willingness of French-educated public to understand the truth about the Vichy experience, the willing mass collaboration of French elites with Nazi Germany, facilitated reconciliation?
Okay. Please.
Two short remarks. I think I'm very grateful for all of you. I personally learned much about that, from that. I think from me, the consequence is we have to continue with that exchange of views and perspectives. Because on the one hand, these perspectives are quite different. And the second is, it is needed for Europe, and especially for us as neighbors, to shape Europe, to get more mutual understanding. And so I think it's very important to establish institutions for that. To push that and to bring it forward. This at first. The second, I think there's a proposal from Germany to Poland, which until now has not got any response. There's in Berlin, in Friedrichshain, who is living in Berlin is knowing it, there's a monument in Berlin, an old communist monument in Friedrichshain, where usually in National Day, Polish National Day and Constitutional Day, we have a celebration. And this is shaped in an old communistic way. It was established there in the 70s. The proposal is to shape that place in a new way and to make clear and to add to that monument some Tafeln, how to say it? Plates to make clear the Polish contribution to that German history, including the time of the Second World War, in which Polish soldiers had fight for the liberation of Germany in all armies of their life. And if history would be justice, Germany, Poland had been the fifth ally. It's a simple way as France, but Stalin prevented. And to make that clear, in my view, would be an important contribution to give that a place in Berlin. Until now, we have no response from the Polish government for that, but I think it would be important, and that's why I wanted to give that information, because we all together ought to try, in my view, to establish this place in a really new-shaped way. Thank you.
Okay, I think now we have had all the questions and statements. I will take the freedom of Chairman to answer two questions really very briefly in order to save time. One question was about the compensation claims, this issue, you can go on the webpage of the Polish embassy in Berlin, and I think they still have this legal expertise by Bartsch and Frohwein, two legal professors, about the potentials of legal claims, and the conclusion is that there are none, whatever these XPLI organizations are dreaming of, but that this is a closed issue in terms of international law. And what, please, because they all want to answer long to really complicated questions, we can also discuss afterwards. I can give more details about it. And the second question was about the participation of Polish authorities in the transfer or expulsion, however you may prefer to call it. I would like to refer you to a volume, Lemberg and Borowczej, two editors, not in English yet, but in German and in Polish. In Polish, the title is Niemcy w Polsce, 1945 until 1950, and there is a huge collection of materials, who did what concerning the well, expulsion or transfer, whatever, wysiedlenie of the Germans. Okay, and now all these more complicated questions. Please go ahead. No, okay. Then maybe the row of
I didn't understand it quite clearly. You asked me about France.
Yes,
taking of Vichy France. Whether there's an acknowledgement of collaboration through Vichy France and how that influenced the German-French rapprochement, the German-French debate. Acknowledgement of guilt on the French side.
yes.
But I think this process of discussion about this guilt will never ending concerning, you know, it's, in France there are several, how to explain it. For example, 68 there was a big discussion about collaboration and so on. Afterwards it was quiet. And several, after 10 years and 10 years, this theme will come off. And Chirac, for example, it's about 4 years ago, it was the first time that he spoke about the responsibility of the Vichy Regierung concerning the expulsion of the Jews. And for that, I think it's not a real special theme between the French and German negotiations or this for the relation, not in an official sense, but in a, I think in the civil speech between the populations, between intellectuals, between literature and so on. This is a theme, and it's an experience. It's the experience of the Germans, it's the experience of the French people, and so it belongs to this history.
Okay, Piotr, you go first questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. And actually, I'm very glad that my depoliticization thesis met so much criticism, because this was what I wanted to achieve. But it was, of course, not a matter of provocation that I put this here on the table, but I simply believe that it's true, and I'm happy to explain it a little bit. I think I deliberately restrict myself saying that what I think is currently taking place is a depoliticization of the memory of the Third Reich. It's not a depoliticization of memory at all in Germany in general, but it's specifically the depoliticization of the memory of the Nazi past, which is, as I've already said, because of the generational change, and it is also because it's simply not useful anymore in politics. What I mean by that is that you cannot really treat the Nazi past in Germany as it used to be before, up to the, I don't know, even mid-90s or even later, as a sort of point of reference as far as political action is concerned. You cannot treat this past as a political instruction how to act in political life. This is, of course, it has got important, this process, which I think is not completed yet, I mean, it's a tendency which I'm seeing. This is probably the reason why you, Mr. Hamzat, object my theory, but because you refer to these aspects of the German culture of memory which actually confirm the thesis that this politicization of the Third Reich is still present. But I think that it's this tendency has got very important consequences for the German-Polish dialogue, because this is exactly what we don't expect in Poland. We would like the Germans to stick to this political interpretation of the Third Reich, and we would like Germans to draw conclusions for the everyday political decisions in the relationship with Poland, which is, yeah, fair enough, but it's simply not going to be satisfied by the German policy. And you, Marek, pointed out that there is a politicization of the Third Reich, this part of memory, for example, in form of Gerhard Schröder celebrating the 60th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, or landing in Normandy. But I think it's misperception. I think it's not. It hasn't got anything to do with the Third Reich itself. It has very much to do with the politicization, which I was referring to in my presentation, of the post-war period in Germany. I mean, it's the fact that Schröder celebrates among celebrates the end of the Second World War among the other major representatives of other major powers in Europe or in the world. It's not because Germany, the major narrative in Germany is changing and towards certain reinterpretation of what the Third Reich, the Nazi past, means in the German history, but the reason is rather that Germany is simply quite self-confident now. The German political culture is based upon a sort of self-confident attitude to the past, which is coming not from the reinterpretation from the Third Reich, but from the awareness of what has been achieved after 45. This is my reading of this debate. And as far as the cosmopolitan moment in this German discourse is concerned, I think it could be politicized. It could be politically instrumentalized. But as far as I understand it, it's not. I mean, I don't see that people who subscribe to this kind of reading of history actually do it in order to bring about a certain revision of the picture of the German past. They actually, if I take Ralph Giordano or I don't know, forgotten the Ralph Giordano, for example, or Helga Hirsch. I don't think it's the main reasoning is to say actually our past was not so bad. It's not this kind of motivation. I think but you're completely right that it could be that someone or some milieux want to misuse this cosmopolitan reading of history, and it's in a way it is taking place in this nationalist milieus in Germany too. I mean, among the ex-police, I think it's quite present this kind of misinterpretation and misuse. But this last point, because Mr. Koselewski also mentioned this pluralist discourse, which you don't agree with this kind of interpretation. I think that is exactly this point that there are many interpretations, or many narratives about the German past now, which is quite a new fact, because in the political, in the public sphere, because it was a, so to say, an abnormal situation over the last 20 years, that there was very clearly one dominant discourse. it doesn't mean that there were no individual memories of expulsions, of bomb war, and so on and so forth. But there was a clear dominant reading of history in the last 20 years, which was very much, very strongly focused on the Holocaust and the German guilt and responsibility. And now it is dissolving. I mean, I think it's dissolving, but it's not a reinterpretation of history, but it's simply a result of some. It's not a top-down process, but a bottom-up. Thank you.
Two short points. The first one, I want to comment the opinion of Mr. Heimsut. I completely agree with you. It is very difficult to demand the same form of responsibility for the Second World War to German politicians who are now 30, 40 years old, the same form of responsibility like towards such great people, great politician statesmen like Helmut Schmidt or Richard von Weizsäcker, who made the war experience, who were officers of the Wehrmacht. That's true. And I agree also that I don't see a lack of sensibility, responsibility in the new, younger German elite for these questions, or for the responsibility. But there's a problem we talked about the knowledge. Which form of responsibility for the Holocaust we need, or which form of war crimes we need. That's a real problem. But what I wanted also to add, what makes me frustrating, or made me frustrating, is that we have also, in this German-Polish dialogue, the responsibility of the Polish side. And I welcome all forms of active historical policy in Germany of the Polish side. And to go back to the problems I mentioned, I was shocked that there was no answer, no comment from the Polish side to the Wehrmacht's Wehrmacht's exhibition. It came 7 or 8 years too late, and it was a German initiative of the German Historical Institute in Warsaw. The same problem we had last year in Berlin, when the Berliners had the possibility to visit 2 exhibitions, an official one on the problem of expulsion and the private one of Erika Steinbach. And the public opinion in Poland and Germany knew 5 years that such exhibitions will come. No possibility for Germans also to make the experience how do Poles interpret these facts. But I wanted also to express, for me, historical policy is not only the problem of export-import of exhibitions, but also the deep problem of long-term education of German elites or future elites who will be able to present Polish perspectives, not one perspective, perspectives in the German society or in the German pluralistic dialogue. That should be the next step of the Polish debate on historical policy. And one more thing, I also agree that the League of Ex-Police does not have such an direct impact on the political scene in Germany. But what is shocking is that some forms, some models of interpretation of narrative, which were made in these political groups, are still alive and are not commented in Germany. And I'm worrying that the official side, based on the official exhibition on expelled persons, on the ex-police, will probably, without a direct influence of the League, transform this narrative in an official one. But we are coming back to the problem, what also Markus Meckel mentioned. We live in an open society in Germany. We have also forms of influence of the Polish society. And to close the discussion, I was really surprised about the reaction of German bishops last year or 2 years ago, who stopped the project of buying a church of St. Michael Church in Berlin by the League of Explosion, but by the foundation of Erika Steinbach. And it were conservative German bishops, also connected with conservative political groups, who told, no, we will not make it. We will not make it because there is a strong influence of Polish bishops who tell us, no, please do work on common project of historical interpretation and not one that are dividing the nation. So you see, we have some dimensions of influence which unfortunately are not used by, well, not only one party, not only of the now ruling president, but also of the current opposition in Poland.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Now we are running really much behind, time, but I think it was a very lively and interesting discussion. Of course, we could have talked for 2 days about it, and I kind of have the feeling we did not address so many issues and so many points and counterpoints, but I think at least we have gotten an impression. And well, let me just end briefly with an observation. Of course, if there's quarreling and open dispute, and then even, you can say, nationalist recriminations between Poland and Germany, I personally don't like it. On the other hand, if you view it from a sociological viewpoint, I do that, and also I'm a historian, one can also say there are a lot of discourses, sometimes there's a lot of quarrels, but it all means there's a lot of communication and interaction between Poland and Germany. And there's really something in the making, like you can say a common public sphere. Might be limited, but still there it is, because this is where all these discussions take place. And I think one can also take this as evidence that indeed the two countries might have very different opinions, but that they are growing together. And I think this is also an encouraging development. Okay, thanks. And,